It's a pleasure to be here. In working with Katsuryu Bill Cooper, we settled for a format regarding this Dharma talk. We settled on a interview format. I'll give him some pre-selected questions that he wants to focus on, and then later we'll open it up for the group. Good morning, Katsu.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Hojo, for putting me in this situation.
Yeah, you won't regret it, I hope.
Katsuryu, with that said, let's jump right in and get started. Who are you? Where are you from? And how did you find your way to Zen?
Well, the name Katsuryu means living dragon, and it was given to me by Matsuoka Roshi during discipleship. Or was it jukai? Probably jukai. I was born in Seattle. I'm the oldest of three brothers. Our family moved to Southern California when I was 8, and that's where I pretty much grew up. And then when I was 38, my wife and I returned, my wife came with me to the Northwest, and we've been here ever since in Bellevue. It was really hard to avoid Zen in 1968, 1969, when I was in high school. And I had a remarkable psychology teacher who basically was teaching cross-cultural studies. He was like a junior Joseph Campbell. And I just loved the guy. And one day he showed us prints, Chinese prints of mountains and rivers. And he explained how in these prints, in the minds of these painters and in this culture, the primary thing was nature. And people, if they could be found at all, were insignificant compared to what the painting was about in terms of like what was going on, this wordless force of nature. That was the experience I had. And these paintings were being done by Zen people, and I'd never seen anything like it. And then I heard about Zen through books, and I had a cousin actually, when I was still fairly young, who said to me, Bill, you ought to look into Eastern religion, Eastern philosophy, because a lot of what you're saying sounds like that. So that was encouragement. I'd always been a bit of I hate to say it, but like when I was really young, 6 and 7, apparently I would knock on people's doors and ask if they believed in God and wanted to talk about God. And there were a couple who invited me in, and they were mothers that were home, and, we'd talk about God. So skipping forward, I had some difficult years when I was in my throughout most of my 20s. I had a difficult time. I had no intention of settling into a career. I was going to college, reading about Zen, drinking way too much. And then one day, I eventually ended up in getting treatment for that. And I had read this book, Journey of Awakening by Ram Dass. And in the back of the book was a directory of Zen centers, of meditation centers. And Matsuoka Center in Long Beach was listed there. I saw it in 1978. And really, it took me 2 years to get there. So I'd been through this recovery program. I had a job, and I'd been straightened out for a very short period of time. And I called the Zen Center. Matsuoka answered the phone. And I set up a time to meet him and to learn more about Zen, because I knew from reading the books what really did it for me. I was reading John Blofeld's Wang Po, and I couldn't understand it. This was in about 1980, 81. I could not understand it. I liked Zen, but I didn't know what he was talking about. And I thought to myself, I've got to get a teacher. I have to get a teacher. And so then that's when I decided to call the Long Beach Zen Temple.
Shunryu, I understand that you ended up living there at the Long Beach Zen Temple with Matsuoka. Would you mind sharing a little bit of that experience with us?
Sure. Well, unfortunately, I didn't get there to the temple because I wanted to be a spiritual person. I was going through a divorce and needed a place to stay. And my school was in Long Beach, and I had been going to the Zen Center for about 6 years. So I asked Matsuoka if I could just crash on the floor. And he said yes. And it was great. Well, it was great in that I got to be in a temple and I got to see Matsuoka, and I knew he's just going to be a regular guy, Bill. This is Zen. They aren't pretending to be special here. But I knew I was going to get a close look, and I still had wrong ideas about Zen. Even after several years of practicing, I think I still wanted Zen to improve me, because it does in certain ways, but I don't think that's the main point. Now I understand what people meant when they say that. For a long time, I was thinking about this just the other day, but so much of my early years, or a lot of my practice, was spent thinking about Zazen, not thinking about it, doing Zazen, practicing. I was focused on Zazen. But there are things after Zazen, and those are a part of Zen too. And what I really like about this particular Zen Center is the openness that is here to sincerely explore the Dharma, and that exploration is supported and corrected, but not punished. So just wanted to put a good plug in for.
That's next year. We start the punishment next year.
Oh, okay.
True. As you worked with Matsuoka, as you spent time with him, and for a few months as you lived with him, could you share a little more about the experience of living with your teacher that solidly, that intensely?
Well, to be honest, I was gone a lot. I had a full-time job and I was in grad school. So I want to be clear about that. We both kept a clean bathroom. We had a great way of living together. I'd get up, shave, get cleaned up, go to work, and then he would use the bathroom. I realize that isn't what you were asking about, but that was a part of our living, that we never had an argument. But to describe Matsuoka, primarily he was a buoyant personality. He was a buoyant person. And for someone like me who's kind of heavy and down, I really wanted to know how to be happier, how to not be so heavy about everything. And, I'm still learning it. The teachers that I have today, I still am getting called on being hey, why don't you lighten up a little bit? You could be a little more positive. And it's a good teaching. I know why they're doing it. And it's not to be an official or a boss or get me to conform. At first, it feels like that in Zen because we're so used to it every place else. But, Zen really isn't about being stern. It's going to look like it, but if you stick around, and especially if you talk to people before and after services and when we're in our street clothes and stuff, you'll realize we're just people trying to learn how to live better. And Matsuoka knew that. He spoke very much to us as householders. He didn't expect us to become monks or act like monks. And I knew that we were kind of out of the mainstream of Zen fairly early. And I was okay with that because he was a very sincere man. And if he was almost always in town and always at our services and willing to talk to us. But he usually dismissed my questions in my memory. Any problem I had was generally answered by continue sitting, keep sitting, keep practicing. I don't know where that's coming from, but is there a question? Anyway, and he was very eager about it. He was an eager teacher. He would kind of, hey, he'd poke you a little bit, look, I want you to hear this. Sit Zazen. You do it for your sake, not for me. Remember that one. And it's true. If I'm sitting Zazen for somebody else, that's not Zazen. He makes a very good point in the Kiyosaku. Lulu is the only place you can get this collection of his talks. But he makes, and I had never quite understood, why is it so bad to have an expectation during Zen? Because I would often have them, I want to feel good. I want to be peaceful. And in the book, he says, we don't develop expectation because if we do, we will miss what's going on. We'll see our expectation. So bringing it, and he says this over and over, our life is about this present moment only. And for me, these are goals. I can't, and this was another misunderstanding I had about Zen. Oh, I need to be doing all of this perfectly all the time. And no, you do the best you can, but it's a big part of my life. Practice isn't just sitting on the cushion. It's, how you walk to your car. What's your mind doing? Or when you sit down at your desk, are we observing ourselves and watching what's going on to keep from it getting out of hand, to bring it back to moderation and the middle way, keeping in mind that, as humans, we're on the planet, we're a big deal, but in this grand scheme of things, who knows? So it's best to, there's a strong sense of humility in Zen. We're more a result of our Zazen than, as Hojo often says, we are a result of Zazen. We're not doing Zazen. We're sitting still and letting Zazen occur. Dropping our mind, dropping our self-centeredness. And that was Matsuoka. Whenever if you don't mind I'll just, one last thing, and then we'll all take a breath. When he talked about Zazen, which wasn't very often, but we always gave instructions, just like you're hearing today at the beginning. But when he was sort of called on to talk about Zazen, he didn't talk about it, he demonstrated it. If we were in a circle in the living room, he would say, Zazen is like this. So it was a practice.
Katsuru, I'm touched and very appreciative of some of the points, some of the experiences you're bringing. Before we open it up to questions from the group as a whole, is there anything else, if you would please take a moment, is there anything else that you'd like to bring this morning related to your experience studying with Matsuoka?
The thing that comes to mind, because I've said the most important things, is the one time that I can remember he kind of scolded us all. He'd been in Japan, so he was gone. And somebody had contacted the temple, and I think it might have been when I was living there. I don't know. Somebody had contacted the temple about a wedding service they perform, and none of us stepped up. We'd not been trained in it. We didn't know. And when he came back, he was pretty upset about that. You're Zen priests, you know, you should have the courage to represent our teacher, our ancestors, what we're doing. Yeah, he was upset. So that also was that's a part of it too. A lot of it actually in Zen, doing things you don't like to do. At least it's that way for me. And then I learn in the experience, they'll put you through trial by fires, but if you step up, you learn. And the teachers here are encouraging us to learn and to step up and everything I'm saying about Matsuoka, he would say to you as well. He would want you to hear it. He would want you to know it. It wasn't just for anybody or our little group. It was for whoever was interested at whatever time. And I'm very grateful to Hojo for publishing his talks, for preserving them.
Okay, Katsuru, thank you for taking the time to bring this to us. Hojo, would you mind coordinating the questions inside the Zendo and online? You might even consider starting with the lead question.
Thank you, John. I will have a question or two myself, probably one I get, but we're going to ask Tsuki Taylor Brown. He will do the facilitation as usual. He's our tech backup guru this morning. So I don't know why there's two John Hinmans on the screen, do you?
Technical difficulties. One's probably his laptop that her computer is logging in now.
So Katsuryu, thank you so much for that heartfelt talk. I'd like you to, it may be too personal for you, but you told me an anecdote or an incident with Matsuoka when you were leaving one day, when he said something about dying. If you could share that, I think it would be of interest.
Yeah. Well, this is when I was living there, or I was visiting on a Saturday morning. It was kind of casual. And I started to ask him about death. I said, when I die, and before I could finish, he said, you don't die. You don't die. He didn't look at me when he said it. He just sort of said it casually. You don't die. And I mean, I had no idea what to say. What do you say to that? Go back and do some Zazen. And it was the same thing with my question about enlightenment. Same kind of setting. I asked him about enlightenment and he said, there is no enlightenment, which shocked me because I know in Soto we de-emphasize it, but something should happen, you would think. But that was my thinking then. But then I had a flash and I said, well, Sensei, was there a moment when you knew that? when you knew there was no enlightenment? And he said, yes. So I think it's a gradual thing. I mean, it has been for me. It's very comforting to know that this is a gradual path where we're not really expected to produce a spiritual result other than, well, I don't know. I won't comment on it. But I think getting along with, I mean, we each have our own spiritual path. But with Matsuoka and with Hojo both, and this became clear with Hojo, what we're doing as, when we teach Zen as practice leaders or friends, people who want to know about it. I just forgot what I was going to say.
Probably had to do with transmitting the method, not the truth.
Yeah, we're sharing the method of Zazen, and that's where my role as a teacher stops. I don't tell people, well, you should do this or that with your life now. That would be a bad move, because everybody has their strong ideas about what they want to do with their life, and we just want to. And they come to us because people come to us because deep down they know they need to sit. They need to sit down and look at their mind and look at what their consciousness is doing and settle down. And of course, we don't settle down at first or ever, or sometimes, but not always. It's very, again, if you try to settle down, you won't. So we have to let go.
Thank you for that answer.
I'll pass it. Anyone in the room right here have a question for Katsuryu?
We're almost 50-50 this time. On screen and in person.
If not, Katsuryu, I have a question, because I am kind of fascinated. You described living with Matsuoka, and how you described it sounded quite intimate. And I guess I'm fascinated, like the subtleties and what can be transferred from teacher to student just through the nonverbal means, through the day-to-day means. And I'm curious if to this day, like on a day-to-day level, if you do something or behave in a certain way, and then you think that's Matsuoka, or like kind of see that whatever you'd call it, heterogeneity, just transference of teacher to student to this day in the day-to-day.
A lot of questions there. I will do my best. He taught, you are Buddha. We are Buddhas. We are a Buddha. This was a foundational teaching of his. So it wasn't anything special. I didn't see anything. He was courteous, respectful, and those are kind of miracles. I mean, where do you go to find that? He taught Zazen. I'll mention a couple things about him, because that'll sort of tell you what I saw. Like he had this, the quirky stuff, funny stuff. He had this, I saw him one day, I walked around the corner, and there he is sitting in his office, hitting his feet with a small hammer. So, and he, being the enthusiastic guy he was, he explained what he was doing. He did this every night to just keep his feet in shape or something, and he was very happy about it. And he had, I hope these aren't too trivial, but you go in looking for the big stuff, and this is what you find. You do find the big stuff over time. You realize over time, and I knew it then, I will realize more as time goes on about this. It's precious to me. And then he had this little glass of seaweed in water on his kitchen counter every day. It was a new thing of seaweed, and he never ate the seaweed, which I couldn't understand, but he'd show me, here's how I put the seaweed in. I cut it with these scissors and stuff. And So you get that. What I saw was he had a bedroom and an office. And when he was in his bedroom, there was a table with a small television. He only watched the news. He'd watch a little bit of news. But he was always doing newsletters or writing somebody or, getting ready for a talk or something like that. He was never lying around watching junk, ever. He was never lying around. He was kind of always up. In fact, I admired this about him. He could get up from sitting in Zazen without using his hands. As long as I knew him, so well into his, I met him in 81. He left Long Beach. I thought he left in 93, and Tassin says 94. But he didn't immediately leave the temple and go to Chicago. He lived with a disciple for a while in his family. And that didn't, that wasn't a long-term solution. So Tassin, I think that's his name, in Chicago, cared for Matsuoka, and then Matsuoka eventually went into a long-term care facility. So thinking about Matsuoka, no, because I don't think so much about Matsuoka, because I want to make this really clear. Matsuoka was about shikantaza. And I say shikantaza because I want to be exact. Well, that's the word he used. And I want to be very specific about what we're talking about. We're not just talking about meditation, because that can be misunderstood. It was always shikantaza. And so, yes, when I sit or think about shikantaza, I come back to the first lesson he gave me, where he brought me into the temple. I think of this, I've had more time to think of it in retirement, on a Saturday in March, and we sat down next to each other. And I loved this. He sort of patted me on the knee as he talked about Zazen. But we get those experiences too from our teachers. We're getting them now. You wouldn't be here if someone wasn't continuing to support our practice. So don't think, oh, gee, I wished I'd known Matsuoka. It's not like that. It's like, well, Zen always comes back to the present moment. So our practice today, and I do want to make a comment on this, if you don't mind. The other day in our group here, we're only doing sort of one sutra at a time, and I distributed Dogen's vow. And I know you might not be familiar with it, but I'll mention a couple things. So one woman got back to me and we spoke, and she said, that Dogen's vow, you guys really want a commitment. And I looked at it, and I want to read like the first verse. We vow with all beings from this life on throughout countless lives to hear the true Dharma, that upon hearing it, no doubt will arise in us, nor will we lack in faith, that upon meeting it, we shall renounce worldly affairs and maintain the Buddha Dharma, and that in doing so, the great earth and all beings together will attain the Buddha way. That is a commitment. And a person can choose to say that's too much. I can't do that. But that's not the effect that the sutra is trying to produce. I mean, that's not its message. I distributed it to people because it says this. Therefore, the Chan master, Lung Ya said, those who in past lives were not enlightened will now be enlightened. And then before Buddhas were enlightened, they were the same as we. Enlightened people of today are exactly as those of old. So it's bringing us together. It's saying we are like our ancestors. We will be our ancestors. And but it takes a commitment. Matsuoka did not compromise on his suggestion that we should sit every day. That was the minimum, that he recommended. Sit every day. Sit when you can during your leisure time. So it was a big part of what he talked about. So it wasn't the mystique of Matsuoka, it was the teaching of Shikantaza.
Okay. We have a hand up, but I had a question whispered in my ear here. For the sake of some newcomers and others who may not understand, would you please talk a little bit about Shikantaza and what it means?
There have been the translations for Shikantaza, a Japanese word, have kind of changed over my lifetime. At first, I usually read it as just sitting. That's how it was usually presented, just sitting. Only sitting, just sitting, like that. But then Okamura, among others, started using the phrase wholehearted sitting. So you get the general idea. We're not meditating on an object. We're watching the present moment and what comes up for us. It might be a sound, a smell, taste, a touch, a thought. And we just observe it, and it'll arise and go away. And we notice that we're thinking and we come back to the present moment. The thought is usually about somewhere else, someplace else, and we come back to the present moment. And that's Hojo, do you have anything to add or clarify there?
I think Sensei would often say when posture, attention, and breath all come together in a unified way, that is the real Zazen. So that suggests that there could be a fake Zazen or not real Zazen. You could be wasting your time. But then he would go on to say Shikantaza is objectless meditation. This is also Dogen. Objectless meditation, when even subject and object merge, or we have to say not two, that is called Shikantaza. So Michael has his hand up.
Yes, Michael.
Thank you so much, first of all, Katsuryu, for coming and doing this for us. So you mentioned in your talk, you came to the realization that there's something beyond Zazen, that's not just Zazen in the practice. And in the stories about Matsuoka Roshi, there's a great emphasis on just sitting, on going back to just sitting. So I was curious what that beyond Zazen is that you're referring to, and then kind of how that integrates into, the practice.
Well, here again, I'll defer to Hojo. I'll just give my interpretation, which Hojo has helped me to clarify, basically helped me to see. And I don't want to say too much, because you'll find out if you continue to sit, you'll see what there is beyond sitting. And you're already doing it. Your life isn't just about sitting right now. But I don't want to say too much, because you'll look for it. Hojo, I would say have faith, have a teacher and do good solid practice, not practice that makes you crazy somehow, but that helps you feel better about yourself and like you're making good decisions and you're connecting with that part of you that is beyond, that isn't words and isn't a teaching, but that's a good thing to be cultivating too.
Okay, so over to me, and then we'll jump to Kushin. I think the earliest, I'm working on a new book in which I'm surveying all of the selected teachings from India, China, and Japan, and my commentary on them. And since I'm in the China the final edit of the China, I hope final edit of the China section right now. And Shinxin Ming, Trust in Mind, is the very first of those poems. It's a very long one. It occupies 3 pages in the service book, whereas Sandokai, the second one, only occupies 1 page, and Hokkyo Zamai, Precious Mirror Samadhi by Tozan, the founder of Soto Zen in China, occupies 2 pages. So Shinxin Ming starts out with the way is not difficult for those who have no preferences, and it gets into an awful lot of stuff. But I think just looking at the title, Trust in Mind, or Faith in Mind, mind with a capital M. And so I think what Katsuryu is pointing at is there's a point beyond which, beyond Zazen, in which you begin to trust this process. You begin to trust your own original mind with a capital M. And so it leads to what Matsuoka called confidence in everyday life.
Thank you, Ojo Sensei. It's funny you mentioned trust in mind though, because I just pulled it up the other day on the podcast, because I know you have a couple episodes on trust in mind, and that you have the master class that goes over it a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm putting in a plug for the next master class. The last one, I think, because of the holiday, only Pat and Michelle. We decided to go through her training on the Doan. She's fine. She's ready to do the Doan anytime. But instead, and so we postponed it till, is it next month? But it's this. Oh, is it this Saturday?
This Saturday?
No, it's the Adams retreat.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really? Okay. Anyway, the next, I don't know. I just show up. For the next master's class is on Shinxin Ming, and I am finalizing the hopefully final edit. I will send that out by email to everybody before the master class. It goes on, my commentary and it go on for pages and pages and pages, so that you can read in great detail what I have to say about it, so we don't have to spend a lot of time on that in the class. This time we will simply address everybody's questions instead of trying to read through the whole thing and comment on it. It's just too much. So Kushin.
Gasho, and thank you so much, Katsuryu, for this lovely, intimate portrayal that you shared with us. My question is a twofold, and perhaps Hojo could also speak to it to add commentary. As some of us have been working on this documentary about his life for a number of years now, a couple things really have struck me, and I wondered if you have reflections on this from your practice with Matsuoka, you could share them. Number one was, we know quite affirmatively that since he arrived on the West Coast in 1940, and then when World War II began and he left, as did many, far too many were interned, but he seems to have not been so. And he started going east, away from the coast, eventually ending up in Chicago in the 40s, and then beginning a Zen Center in the 50s in Chicago, as we know, and then in the 80s coming to Long Beach. So two things. We only have a couple videos that remain of Matsuoka, and they're while giving services in Chicago and also in Long Beach. And I wondered if you could comment on what it felt like, because you've had many teachers as far as both Eastern and Western with Matsuoka and current teachers here. Can you talk about what you found particularly interesting or different or exciting about sitting, service, and then post-service activities with Matsuoka, if there was a sort of way that it happened? And secondly, we know that Matsuoka really chose to gear his presentation of Zazen and Soto Zen to Westerners, keeping in mind a Western mindset and understanding that it could not be exactly like his upbringing in Japan. And maybe you could speak both of you could speak to those two different things, because I find it quite unique in our lineage and in Matsuoka's teaching. Thank you.
So something in particular you're kind of saying, Kushin?
Yeah, just if there was something that really struck you about his presentation of service, Dharma
Yes,
talk.
he did. The service did strike me. He was always serious and reverential. There was never any clowning around. When he stood before the altar in Gasho, looking at whatever, I mean, there he is at the altar. He was very sincere. It wasn't a perfunctory thing that he was trying to get out of the way. So that tells you something, you see that and you're like, oh, okay, this guy he can stop and well, he can stop. He can stop and look. Yeah, and it wasn't a punitive kind of thing. It was just like, we're serious now. But then after service, well, there was always sort of the awkward sitting down in a circle having tea. His motto is silence is thunder, which is for some of us, not everybody, but many of us are into it or have been. But there we are in a circle and we're expected to say something. So it was always kind of awkward, because if you asked a question, if I asked him a question, and I can't remember specifically what I asked him, but probably about pain or, my mind won't calm down. He would just continue sitting. He'd sort of laugh that you were having that problem and continue sitting. And he didn't really want to talk about personal problems or anything too personal in that seated meditation. He checked in, he said everything was fine, bowed. If he asked a question, it was kind of dismissed. So that was a plus and a negative, because he was Japanese American, and I did see American teachers who'd studied with Japanese read their books and felt like that was something I would be interested in doing, and did eventually do, and it was helpful. But I maintained my contact with Matsuoka. I only lived about 2 miles away, and I definitely continued to visit and know him, but I was more of a participant elsewhere. The other thing about him, and here we go with the trivial stuff, the first thing you did when you got to the temple was you washed your hands. You couldn't start talking to him until you'd gone, wash your hands, now you were ready. And that too says something. I mean, look at the pandemic. If we'd been doing it, slowing down a little bit and taking care to clean ourselves, and when we cough into the elbow, he had more boxes of tissues around him than a therapist. They were everywhere. But then the other thing after service that was basically like where Sensei would want us to take him out for a bite to eat. So we would, and Hojo reminded me it was Polly's Pies in Long Beach that we would go to. And so, you wash your hands, you took him out to eat dinner, you sat the service, and you hoped it was working.
I can testify to some of that too, from my perspective. In Chicago, he's very fastidious, as are most Japanese. And he would always wash all of his silverware at a restaurant. He'd dip it in the glass of water and clean it before he used it. All kinds of things like that. And in Chicago, I was in my 20s and the 60s, and that should tell you everything you need to know. So we would have these guys come in off the street, Halstead and Fullerton in Chicago, barefoot. They'd be walking around the sidewalks in Chicago in the streets barefoot. They'd come walking into the center barefoot. he was aghast at this. So he had to stand there with a big basket full of white socks, clean socks. And we'd give each one of those guys a pair of socks, and they had to put them on before they could go in. So when I went to I would go after, it was, Kushin said the 80s, but it was actually the 70s that he moved to Long Beach, 1970, actually, when I moved to Atlanta. And so in the interim years, I would go out there and he would visit here once a year, typically, or more. We meet up in Chicago, and we met up in Tokyo and so forth. So we sustained a 30-year practice at a distance, which, by the way, is one of the benefits of Soto Zen. You don't have to have a live-in relationship with your teacher, and they didn't have to have a live-in relationship with you. So I go there one time, and we're all robing up and everything. And I think he changed over the years. He was treating the group at Long Beach a lot more formally. Everybody had to wear robes that looked like than he did in Chicago. But Dokusan was, he didn't sit and chat with you in Dokusan. That was not that type of Dokusan. You would make an appointment with him outside the regular schedule. You would show up, and he would chant the Heart Sutra, and then you'd both sit. And then you'd chant at the end, we chant the Japanese and the English, and that was it. You might go out to the restaurant and have lunch or something and talk a little bit, but his Dokusan was Zazen. That was it. And so when I go there, he's unhappy with the way they're striking the gong. Nobody will hit it hard enough. He's telling me this. He wants me to be the dawn and lead the chant. So I'm okay, I'll do that. I'm sitting there and we're going through the chant. He's standing here facing the altar as usual. And it comes to the first gong, I completely muff it. It's just like so it was done anyway. Person, I'm laughing. The next gong did a good job. So
I think what we're trying to say by kind of highlighting these things is Matsuoka showed me how to take care of a life.
Yeah.
And that's Buddhism. Take care of our lives and others. He was a very peaceful guy. He did not cause problems. And he was energetic, writing, talking, teaching.
He was in Chicago. He was sometimes accused. It was in the 60s, as I said, Vietnam, acid, psychedelics, LSD, and all that was going on. And there was a lot of experimental communal living going on. And people were accusing him of splitting up couples and things and trying to get between husbands and wives and get money from people. He had a lot of naysayers and people accusing him of things totally off base. And so his life was not a bowl of cherries necessarily. But just to finish up this short story, so afterwards, we're all sitting around having tea on the floor in our robes, and people are looking at me, and we talked a little bit while we were robing up before the thing. And so I said, well, in Atlanta, we have a little dialogue, questions, answers. If anybody has anything they'd like to ask me about what we do, I'd be happy to answer. Matsuoka Roshi says, questions, answers, unimportant. So, well, of course, Sensei is correct. And but afterwards, the guy, when we were disrobing and changing our clothes, the guy was saying, actually, we'd really like to talk a little bit more about this.
Yeah, he was clear. He was clear.
So at one point, I had to realize that I was not Matsuoka. I used to teach the way he taught, tried to just imitate him. And I had to realize that my students are not me. So you have to have the flexibility to imitate your teacher in the beginning. There's a turning point at which you have to have the flexibility to innovate. And so I think that explains why I don't try to do what Matsuoka did.
Yeah, thank you very much, both of you. Just a quick anecdote that talks to this sincerity and peaceful nature. Through our research work, when Matsuoka Roshi left the West Coast in 41 as others were getting interned. He first went to Denver, where we know he had some connection to the Buddhist teachers there, and arrived and said, I want to set up a temple and teach Zazen. And, you know, they kind of looked at him, how this is our interpretation. He kind of looked at him a little sideways and said, well, good luck. We can't give you any money. Good luck. And he then got a job at the U.S. Naval Academy in Boulder for about 6 months until that didn't work out so well. He had enough English, but not enough for utilizing it there. And somehow he made his way to Chicago. This is in the middle of World War II, and arrived in Chicago in the 40s, early 40s, around 43. And same thing, he had some contact there. And when he landed, he tried to meet with the local Buddhist teachers, and they similarly kind of said, what are you doing? And I'm paraphrasing. And he said, well, I want to start a Buddhist temple. I want to teach Zazen. And they again kind of looked at him sideways and said, good luck. We don't have any money. And one of the women that he had met there that was quite a well-known personage in the community, the Japanese American community, she contacted the FBI and said, hey, I don't know if you know this, but there's this guy here. He seems very good. He seems like a really nice guy. I'm not suggesting he's a troublemaker, but did you know he was here? And that was the first time the FBI actually did ID him, called him in, did not intern him or anything, but they kept a dossier on him for until the war was over. It was over 300 pages long, all typed out, and extraordinary and interesting. We hope to bring some light to it. But throughout it all he was doing was trying to start a temple and teach Zazen. There was no other nefarious deeds going on, no suggestion. Nobody ever heard him talk that way. He wanted to teach Westerners Shinkantaza. And so it really speaks to what both of you have said. And I just wanted to share that with some of the other group that may not have heard some of these things. It's just fascinating. And what you speak of is so true to what we're finding in our research. And thank you both so much for shedding great light on this.
Before we close, thank you, Kushin. Oh, I was going to spotlight my wife, but she has eye drops in her eyes and looks like she's crying. But wave at the folks, Ellen.
Hello, back to you.
Ellen's been my partner in Zen since the day we met. Our third date was at Matsuoka's. And we left. She'd never sat meditation for that long, and the first words out of her mouth as we left were, I feel like I want to scream. So, you know, she's still sitting. I'm sorry, Hojo.
Add a little bit to that, just that he is credited with being the first to establish a Zendo meditation hall for Westerners. Nobody else thought we were ready for it. And I think we're probably still not ready for it, but he was the first to do that. And that was his whole mission. By the way, the FBI transcript is really a hoot. If you know Matsuoka and you read this FBI guy trying to interrogate her, trying to get him to pin him down on something, it's just hilarious. Well, if Soto Shu ordered you to go to Mexico, would you go to Mexico? Go to Mexico. I'm here to teach you. It's hilarious.
I'd bring my wife if you were talking to me. I don't think you were, though.
Right.
That's about it, I think.
A date, have a good time, show girl a good time.
I also want to thank.
Be quiet and they'll hit you with a stick once in a while.
I want to thank John and Taylor and everybody that put this meeting together, and thank all of you for joining me. The confidence to speak about Matsuoka has only recently developed, and I'm happy to have been able to do it.
Thank you, Katsuryu. I believe we're about to chant closing first. And
is there any closing questions anybody wants to?
yeah, any closing questions or comments before we do the closing vote? I suppose another statement, again, just to refresh on Donna, please consider contributing to the Atlanta Soto Zen Center and our efforts and programming, so we're able to support programs like these. Kind of a PBS statement right there, but thank you.
If you have your little book, you see 4 great vows. Can we fit? Repeat them 3 times, so you typically don't really even need your book. Start picking up on the 3rd time. They should be on one of the inside covers. So 4 great vows are the vows of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to help all beings. Here.
It's also on the very, very back. So there you go.
Beings illusions are inexhaustible. I long to know. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to discern the glory is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. You are number. I vow to freedom. Illusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless. So I vow to free them. Illusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize. Thank you for your patience and listening. Usually we, like Matsuoka, we go out and have lunch, and I can't join today, but with lovely Thai sushi restaurant up on top of the hill in the shopping center. So if any of you would like to go to lunch, please carpool with each other or go together. Anybody want to do that today? I can't join. Personally, I can't join today. Okay.
Thank you, everybody on Zoom. Thank you for your time.